Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science, where you can curl up under the blankets and drift into a story that moves as slowly as the Milky Way turns. Tonight your eyes find a stranger at the edge of the cosmic gate, a luminous wanderer cutting into our solar system from places so far away that even light needs ages to make the trip. This visitor has been tagged with the name 3I/Atlas, though the shorthand makes it sound like a piece of software rather than a lump of frozen minerals that has flown through the darkness for billions of years. You probably won't survive this, don't worry, not in the dramatic way, but in the ordinary way that no human lifespan can outlast an interstellar object's slow trek through the void. Atlas will still be out there long after our whole civilization is just a faint layer in the rocks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, let me know your location and what time it is there, because it's oddly comforting to imagine this comet gliding across all our skies at once. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the hush of the night sky, letting the horizon pull your gaze upward. At first, there's only the reliable sprinkling of stars, the planets, the faint smudge of the Milky Way, and maybe the occasional blink of an airplane. But somewhere in that glittering field lurks something unfamiliar, a visitor not born of our sun's family, not tied to the clockwork of the planets. It drifts in on a hyperbolic orbit, an open curve like a slingshot that never closes, proof that this isn't some recycled comet looping back for another curtain call. This one is a stranger, trespassing from far beyond. The headlines, when they mention Atlas at all, make it sound harmless, almost boring. New interstellar comet detected. You imagine a bored intern typing that while sipping iced coffee, never really grasping the magnitude. Yet here you are, staring up at a cosmic nomad whose home could have been around a star that died before our Earth had oceans. That's not boring, that's humbling. You picture the comet itself, a nucleus maybe a kilometre across, jagged, dark as charcoal, cloaked in frozen gases that start to sublimate as it nears our sun. A faint tail unspools behind it, like chalk dust brushed across a blackboard. That glow is what makes it visible to us, the giveaway of its fragile chemistry. The funny part is, if you could land on it, you'd probably bounce off in slow motion, because its gravity is almost nothing, less than the effort of lifting a backpack. You'd look very heroic in a spacesuit and then very silly as you drifted away like an overgrown balloon. There's a quiet drama in remembering that this isn't the first time we've had a guest from beyond. Historians still argue whether Chinese astronomers recorded strange interstellar bodies in their meticulous sky charts centuries ago, but the first confirmed one in modern science was ʻOumuamua, that long cigar-shaped oddball discovered in 2017. It spooked everyone a little by accelerating in a way comets shouldn't. Atlas is only the third such visitor spotted, which makes you feel like you're living in a rare chapter of astronomical history. Out of billions of stars, only 3 interstellar objects have ever been caught sneaking through, and you're alive to witness one. You think about how long it's been travelling. Atlas might have been drifting since before humans figured out fire. Imagine it passing by alien suns, through nebulae lit in pink and blue, through gulfs of empty nothing. And now it's here, briefly waving its tail in our direction, like someone leaning into a doorway before moving on. The scale is so big that your brain does the only sensible thing. It quietly shuts down into a kind of awe-induced nap mode. Of course, the quirky side of comets is never far away. The ancient Egyptians once tried using crocodile dung as sunscreen, which is a choice, but they also tracked comets with an almost obsessive reverence, linking them to gods and warnings. To them, a streak across the heavens was a celestial message. And here you are with a smartphone app that can buzz and say, "Hey, Atlas is above your horizon right now." Same sky, different vibe. The night air feels cooler as you imagine Atlas creeping closer to the sun, the frosty outer layers popping and fizzing like dry ice dropped into water. Somewhere, an observatory dome whirs open, scientists muttering over data, coffee cups growing cold beside laptops. They'll announce the numbers later, velocity, eccentricity, magnitude. But for you, it's not numbers. It's the wonder of knowing something utterly alien is passing just within sight. You close your eyes and listen. The sky is silent, of course, but in your imagination you give Atlas a sound, maybe the whisper of snow underfoot or the fizz of soda bubbles escaping. Something small, familiar, almost friendly to balance out the cosmic immensity. It reminds you of how children will wave at airplanes, convinced the pilot can see them. You almost want to wave at Atlas too, though it would never wave back. It's strange comfort, really, that a chunk of rock and ice can make you feel both tiny and connected at the same time. The comet doesn't care about you, doesn't even know you exist, yet you care about it, enough to lie awake at night thinking, watching, imagining. The universe doesn't need your attention, but you offer it anyway, like a quiet gift. And as the minutes stretch, you realize Atlas is only at the beginning of its brief luminous intrusion into your sky. There will be comparisons, doubts, whispers, maybe even fears. But for now, you're simply here, looking up, sharing the night with a visitor from beyond. You can't think about Atlas without remembering the first interstellar celebrity, ʻOumuamua. The name itself comes from Hawaiian, meaning a messenger from afar arriving first, which sounds mystical enough to fit the mood. Back in 2017, when that strange cigar-shaped object zipped through the solar system, astronomers were caught completely off guard. It wasn't round, wasn't glowing with the usual comet fuzz, and worst of all, it changed speed in a way that gravity alone couldn't explain. The news latched onto it for a few days. Cue the alien jokes, cue the shrugging experts, and then most outlets moved on. You blink, and the first confirmed visitor from another star system is relegated to a quirky science segment between cat videos. Still, ʻOumuamua set the stage. You remember how scientists described its elongated body 10 times longer than it was wide. Some argued it looked like a cosmic splinter, the shard of some bigger object shattered long ago. Others imagined a flat pancake-like shape that tumbled in the sunlight. Historians still argue whether old chronicles of fiery rods in the sky were exaggerated tales of normal comets, or whether we've been seeing alien debris for millennia without knowing it. But what everyone agrees on is this: ʻOumuamua cracked open the door to a whole new category of discovery. And now, Atlas, 3I, the third interstellar interloper, slips through that same cosmic threshold. Unlike ʻOumuamua, Atlas shows itself more willingly, developing the classic glowing coma and faint tail that scream comet, even through backyard telescopes. In some ways, that makes it less spooky, less prone to sensationalism. Yet the more you compare the two, the stranger Atlas becomes. Its orbit, its coloration, its chemistry, they don't line up neatly with the textbook expectations. It's like meeting the younger sibling of someone famous and realizing they have quirks you didn't anticipate. You think back to how quickly conspiracy theories bloomed around ʻOumuamua. One fringe group claimed it was an alien probe disguised as a rock, waiting for us to ping it with radar so it could reply. Another insisted it was a fragment of a Dyson sphere, drifting aimlessly after its creators abandoned it. Most astronomers laughed those off, though with the kind of laughter that leaves just enough space for doubt. Because really, what's the statistical likelihood that the very first interstellar object we spot happens to behave unlike anything we've seen before? Atlas doesn't help ease the paranoia. Its brightness varies strangely, like a faulty bulb flickering. The official explanations involve jets of gas venting as the sun warms its crust, but that doesn't stop your brain from wondering, what if the news is understating things again, downplaying oddities so no one panics? It wouldn't be the first time. Imagine the headline, "Comet flickers for totally normal reasons." Not exactly clickbait, but it's safer than admitting the data feels weird. There's a historical echo here too. In the Renaissance, comets were feared as omens of doom. When Halley's comet blazed across the skies in 1066, it was said to have foretold the Norman conquest of England. Entire chronicles painted it as a fiery sword pointing to destruction. Fast forward to today, and instead of doom, we get hashtags. You smile at the thought, medieval villagers trembling at the heavens, modern teenagers shrugging, Atlas is trending. Different responses, same sky, but under the sarcasm you feel that tug of war. ʻOumuamua came and went too fast, no spacecraft ready, no probes waiting. Atlas at least gives you a second chance to dwell in the mystery. If ʻOumuamua was the trailer, Atlas feels like the feature presentation, and just like in the movies, you half expect a plot twist. The quirky tidbit your mind won't drop. When ʻOumuamua passed by, one serious Harvard astrophysicist published a paper suggesting it might be artificial. The academic world recoiled, Not because the math was wrong, but because the suggestion sounded too much like science fiction. Yet the paper still exists, still cited. It reminds you that even in the halls of reason, wonder has sharp elbows. Now Atlas drifts in, and somewhere in those same halls, whispers must be stirring. Is this just another icy wanderer, or another piece of a puzzle too big for us to see? Meanwhile, you keep staring upward. Atlas isn't just a light in the sky. It's a reminder of scale. That rock has wandered longer than any civilization has lasted, longer than your entire species has existed. The fact that you can track it with a smartphone star map app feels like a cosmic joke. As if the universe tossed us a relic older than Earth itself, and your response is, cool, does it show up in night mode? You chuckle at your own absurdity, then let the humour fade back into quiet. The sky stretches, and Atlas creeps onward, never in a hurry, never in need of headlines. It doesn't care about ʻOumuamua or conspiracies or your sleepless musings, but you care, that's the difference. And in that caring, you tether yourself to both objects, the first strange messenger and the new one gliding silently into your night. You settle deeper into your pillow, letting your thoughts follow Atlas along its improbable route. Unlike the neat ellipses of planets and regular comets, Atlas doesn't loop politely around the sun. Its path is a hyperbola, an open curve that never doubles back. It comes in fast, swings near the sun once, and then vanishes forever, flung back into the abyss like a stone skipped across cosmic water. That shape alone already tells you, not one of ours. No slow return, no familiar period, no see you in 75 years like Halley. This is a one-time guest. The trajectory is precise enough on paper. Math scribbled in observatory logs, data points plotted like constellations. Yet when astronomers trace it carefully, they see little hints of deviation. Tiny nudges, accelerations that don't quite fit Newton's clean equations. With comets, that sometimes happens. Gas vents erupting like miniature geysers, pushing the body ever so slightly off course. But with Atlas, the wobbles seem trickier to pin down. Historians still argue whether similar unexplained nudges in ancient comet records were observational errors, or whether people long ago noticed the same mysteries we wrestle with today. You imagine Atlas barreling through deep space, its velocity somewhere around 60 kilometers per second. That's so fast that if you blink, in 1 second it's already outrun your entire city. The speed is a kind of violence hidden in silence. There's no roaring jet engine, no friction in the vacuum, just relentless motion. You picture the pale blue dot of Earth along the path and feel a tiny rational shiver. Because if Atlas happened to be a few degrees different in angle, a few million kilometers off in timing, you wouldn't be watching it safely through binoculars. You'd be watching the news panic in real time. The funny part is how humans deal with these orbits. Computers run the simulations with confidence, thousands of iterations, error bars, probability clouds. And yet, you can sense the nervous humour in the astronomers' voices. It's the same tone meteorologists get when predicting hurricanes. They trust the math, but they've lived through enough surprises not to bet their house on it. When they talk about Atlas's path, you catch that same mixture of certainty and shrug. There's a quirky tidbit floating in your memory. In the 1700s, Edmund Halley, yes, that Halley, once suggested that comets could nudge planets, even alter climates if they passed close enough. He was mocked for dramatizing, but he wasn't entirely wrong. Cosmic billiards is a real thing. Some scholars even wonder if stray interstellar comets like Atlas have delivered water or organics to young worlds. If so, this isn't just a random icy rock. It could be the courier service of life itself. And here you are, lying in the dark, wondering if Atlas carries chemistry that once seeded someone else's oceans. Of course, you can't help imagining the other theories. A few internet forums whisper that the trajectory doesn't look natural, that it almost resembles a planned flyby, the way a spacecraft would slingshot around a planet for speed. It's fringe, sure, but the thought sticks. Could a rock this ancient and battered still be guided? More likely it's just your human brain searching for patterns, anthropomorphizing the random. Still, it's not like astronomers ever truly ruled out weirdness in ʻOumuamua's case. Back in history, trajectory meant prophecy. When medieval monks tracked comets with quills and parchment, they saw the arc of fate, not just geometry. To them, the sky's paths were divine handwriting. Imagine their panic if they could see today's orbital simulations, a glowing line on a screen stretching backward into interstellar darkness and forward into infinity. Would they tremble at the same thought you have, that Atlas will never return? The reality is both scarier and strangely soothing. Atlas's trajectory ensures it will not intersect Earth. It swoops in, gets warmed, maybe fragments a bit, and sails out. No headlines about doom, no movies about Bruce Willis saving us, just a graceful exit. Yet as you picture its departure, the melancholy sinks in. You only get this one chance to see it. If you blink too much, if clouds cover the sky, if life distracts you, it'll be gone forever, a ghost in memory and data logs. You let yourself imagine Atlas's point of origin. Maybe it came from the icy shell of another star system, a cloud like our Oort cloud, shaken loose by a passing giant planet. Maybe it was expelled millions of years ago when its home star migrated. Or maybe, this is the part you almost whisper, it comes from nowhere familiar at all, tossed free when its parent star died. That makes it not just a visitor, but a survivor, a relic from a place that no longer exists. The orbit draws a line across your mind. Past and future entry and exit, nothing looping back. A one-way ticket. That makes you think of yourself, your own trajectory, not infinite, not looping, just one pass, here and gone. And yet, like Atlas, you burn a little brighter when you pass near warmth, near attention. Maybe that's all the meaning you need. Above you, the sky feels heavier with possibility. Somewhere in that darkness, Atlas is following its hyperbolic curve, steady, indifferent. You watch, you wonder, and you let its path bend your thoughts in ways no equation can quite predict. You drift along with Atlas now, not just watching its motion, but peeling back its frozen skin, as though you could hold a piece of its chemistry between your fingers. The textbooks would tell you that comets are messy snowballs, dust, rock, ices of water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, ammonia, and whatever else space could pack in during their birth. But Atlas is not quite a textbook comet. Its sectoral fingerprints, those faint colours teased out by splitting its light, suggest an odd balance, heavier in carbon chains, lighter in water ice than expected, almost like it was cooked in a different cosmic kitchen, under a star whose recipe book doesn't match our sun's. You picture its nucleus, jagged, charcoal black, darker than asphalt, with patches of volatile ices locked beneath. As it edges closer to sunlight, those hidden ices fizzes out through cracks, hissing into space and dragging dust along. That dust becomes the glowing shroud, the coma surrounding it like an aura. Through a decent backyard telescope, Atlas isn't a rock, but a fuzzball, hazy and faint. But if you know the chemistry behind the glow, you see more than haze. You see carbon atoms slamming into photons, molecules breaking apart in a bright, invisible fireworks show. Historians still argue whether early Greek philosophers, like Anaxagoras, understood that comets were natural celestial bodies, or whether they thought of them as fiery exhalations from Earth. The irony is that both explanations are a little wrong and a little right. Atlas does behave like a cosmic exhalation, venting its icy lungs into the void. Only the air isn't Earth's. It's the breath of another star's nursery, frozen billions of years ago. Here's the quirky tidbit that sticks. In the 19th century, some chemists actually believed that comets might be made of pure gas, giant balloons floating through space. That theory sounds laughable now, yet when you look at Atlas's shimmering haze, it doesn't feel so far-fetched. There really is a balloon-like fragility to it, so delicate, so temporary, that a strong enough solar gust could unravel its structure in days. And maybe that's what unsettles you about Atlas. Not its alien origin, not the headlines the news refuses to write, but its sheer fragility. Something that has travelled billions of kilometres, survived eons of cosmic weather, now risks its unravelling the moment it comes close to a medium-sized yellow star. It's like watching an ancient traveller finally reach your door, only to collapse into dust on the threshold. You imagine what those frozen molecules have endured: radiation from stars, collisions with interstellar dust, gravitational nudges from unseen giants. Yet they persist, holding their bond until just the right heat snaps them free. Each puff of gas is a whisper of history. Methane from a molecular cloud before Earth even formed. Carbon dioxide from a disk that might have circled a long-vanished star. When you look at Atlas, you aren't just seeing ice, you're seeing chemical time capsules. The scientists working on its spectrum are not immune to this poetry. Sure, they publish graphs and numbers, but you can hear it in their conference talks. The excitement that these ratios of cyanide to water, these traces of organic chains, could hint at conditions utterly alien to our own. Maybe Atlas was born in a colder nebula than ours, where nitrogen froze more readily. Maybe it wandered through dense molecular fog, picking up complex hydrocarbons like dust clings to your socks. Every odd reading is a clue, but the puzzle feels bigger than their pieces. The news, of course, trims that nuance away. Comet contains organic molecules, a headline might say, as though that isn't a thunderclap of significance. Organics are the raw ingredients for life. To downplay them is like finding a recipe book in an abandoned house and calling it some old paper. But you, lying in the dim hum of your room, can afford to dwell on it. You can savour the thought that Atlas might be a courier of cosmic recipes, bearing hints of alien kitchens we'll never taste. Your imagination runs further. What if Atlas isn't just unusual, it's typical? What if every star system spits out its own flavours of comets, and our solar system is just one diner in a galaxy-sized food court? That means every interstellar visitor could bring a new sample menu. One comet with extra carbon, another spiced with sulfur compounds, another with exotic ices we don't even have names for. Suddenly, the idea of life elsewhere feels less like a question of if, and more a matter of which recipe clicked first. And then, a playful aside sneaks in. If Atlas is a sample platter from another star system, should we be grateful the universe didn't fling us a cosmic durian? Imagine the astronomers' press release. Comet emits odour of rotting onions and gym socks, source still under investigation. Comforting to know space spared us that. Yet even as you laugh softly at your own joke, the awe lingers. You roll the idea around like a lozenge in your mind. This fragile, flickering body is older than your world, older than every city and song, and here it is dissolving quietly under our sun. The chemistry of Atlas isn't just data, it's a conversation between stars, whispered across gulfs of time, and you are lucky enough to overhear a fragment. You lean into the image of Atlas glowing faintly in the darkness, its tail unfurling like a streamer too shy to fully dance. Most comets wear white or yellowish veils, their gas tails scattering sunlight into familiar hues. But Atlas carries something stranger. Observers describe a faint blue tint clinging to its coma and trailing outward. It's delicate, almost ghostly, the kind of colour you'd miss if you blinked too long. Yet once you notice it, you can't forget it. It's as though the comet dipped its brush in a palette borrowed from another sky. That pale blue comes from ionised gases, carbon monoxide, cyanogen, and other fragile molecules blasted into glow by the sun's ultraviolet rays. They fluoresce in that cool spectral shade, painting Atlas's path with a reminder that chemistry in space is never just black and white. And still, the tone seems unusual, brighter than many comets from our own solar system. It makes you wonder if Atlas's original nursery baked in a different chemical oven, stacking its recipe with extra carbon compounds. You picture yourself squinting at it through a small telescope, maybe on your porch with a blanket pulled tight. At first it's just a blur, but as your eyes adjust, there's that faint streak of colour, almost like chalk smudged across deep velvet. It isn't dramatic like fireworks, it's subtle, quiet, the kind of beauty that asks for patience. You smile at the irony, something that has travelled billions of years just to appear as a faint smudge in your eyepiece. Historians still argue whether comets with unusual colours recorded in Babylonian tablets were symbolic exaggerations or genuine observations. Some ancient texts describe blue stars with tails as omens of upheaval, while others list them as portents of royal success. Either way, the colour never went unnoticed. Even thousands of years ago, people understood that a comet's hue meant something different. Now you look at Atlas's tint and feel the same curiosity. Different tools, same sky. Of course, your mind drifts into quirkier territory. Cyanogen, one of the molecules glowing blue in comet tails, is technically toxic. Back in 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, newspapers panicked readers with headlines suggesting Earth would pass through a cloud of poisonous gas. People actually bought comet pills and comet umbrellas to protect themselves, which probably did nothing, except enrich clever salesmen. Atlas won't poison anyone, but the memory makes you chuckle. Humans never miss an opportunity to panic creatively. Still, the blue feels more symbolic than dangerous. It's the kind of colour you associate with mystery, Oceans too deep to explore, flames so hot they lose their orange, the faint glow of electronics in a darkened room. It suggests distance, coldness, something untouchable. You can imagine ancient storytellers spinning it into meaning, a messenger of winter, a herald of change, a celestial candle burning in another spectrum. The scientists, meanwhile, prefer their spectroscopy charts, their carefully plotted emission lines. They'll tell you the blue comes from CO+ ions fluorescing in sunlight, plain and simple. But if you asked them quietly after the conference, you'd hear their excitement. Because even plain chemistry has implications. Different ratios of gases mean different birth conditions, maybe even an origin cloud that cooled faster or held different elemental balances. Each comet's glow is like a fingerprint, and Atlas's blue is a signature from another family of stars. You let that sink in. The comet is literally painting light across space with molecules older than Earth itself, and your eyes, fragile human tools, can catch a glimpse of that. The thought feels almost illicit, like overhearing a secret not meant for you. For a moment, you let yourself imagine if Atlas were closer, his blue tail stretching broad across the night sky. People would gather in fields, smartphones raised, voices hushed. Headlines wouldn't ignore it then. Kids would ask if it was a portal, poets would compare it to icy rivers, someone on the internet would definitely Photoshop it into a lightsaber. Instead, Atlas keeps its show muted, visible only to those who seek it. A quiet secret, not a spectacle. And maybe that's fitting. Not every messenger arrives with trumpets and fire. Some drift in softly, trailing blue whispers, only noticed by insomniacs with binoculars and scientists with patient hearts. You can feel the comet asking for that patience now, asking you to slow your breath, let your gaze soften, and simply watch. As your eyelids grow heavier, you picture Atlas gliding on, leaving its blue fingerprints against the void. Faint, ephemeral, and yet impossibly ancient. A reminder that beauty doesn't need to shout to leave a mark. The longer you linger with Atlas, the more your thoughts drift backward, far beyond telescopes, beyond news feeds, to the nights when comets first carved themselves into human imagination. Picture an ancient plain under a star-crowded sky. No streetlights, no smartphones, just fire crackling in the distance. A streak appears overhead, sudden, bright, uninvited. To you, a comet might mean a press release or a blog post. To them, it was terror and prophecy. Atlas, faint as it is, would have been taken as a divine announcement. Cultures everywhere wove comets into their stories. The Chinese, meticulous sky watchers, recorded them in dusty bamboo scrolls for thousands of years. They even classified tails, straight, crooked, bushy, as though they were diagnosing heavenly illnesses. Historians still argue whether their broom stars correspond exactly to comets we know today, but the dedication is undeniable. To them, Atlas's ghostly streak might have been a sweeping broom, clearing out the cosmic dust in preparation for some earthly upheaval. The Babylonians weren't shy about assigning doom either. A sudden blue-tinged light in the sky would be written down as a warning for kings. Sharpen your spears or guard your throne. A ruler's fortune could hang on the arc of a comet. You imagine a trembling priest standing before a monarch whispering that a sign had appeared. Atlas, perhaps, if fate had timed it differently. Would the king rejoice or shiver? Probably both. Even closer to home, medieval Europe bristled with comet lore. When Halley's comet appeared in 1066, chroniclers said it foretold the death of England's King Harold. The Bayeux tapestry even stitched it into fabric, a star with fiery hair glaring down on soldiers. You glance up at the night now and chuckle. If they'd seen Atlas, faint and fragile, maybe they'd have stitched it as a ghost with blue hair, drifting over their fields of battle. The quirky side of this history makes you grin. In the late 1500s, when Tycho Brahe carefully measured a bright comet, he proved it must be farther than the moon, smashing the idea that comets were just atmospheric wisps. But he did it while wearing a prosthetic nose. He'd lost the original in a duel over math. Imagine explaining that to Atlas. Yes, we studied your path, but only after stabbing each other over algebra. Humanity at its finest. And here you are, lying comfortably thinking of Atlas not as doom, but as wonder. The irony is that while ancient cultures feared comets as unpredictable strangers, you know Atlas is even more alien than they guessed. Not from Earth, not from the sun, but from another star altogether. If they thought local omens mattered, what would they have said about a visitor from beyond the solar neighbourhood? A divine envoy? a demon, or maybe a reminder that their world was even smaller than they realized? The thing is, fear and fascination aren't so different. When villagers gasped at a comet, their awe wasn't far from yours now. Same heartbeat quickening, same wide eyes, same tilt of the head skyward. You just swap trembling prayers for sleepy jokes, because that's how your culture manages the same raw emotion. The sky hasn't changed, only the costumes have. And you think, maybe the news misses that. Maybe the bland headlines are their way of avoiding panic, of skipping the centuries of baggage comets carry. Interstellar visitor displays faint coloration is safer than cosmic messenger from beyond streaks past Earth. But deep down, people still want the latter. We've always wanted our skies to mean something. You picture yourself as one of those ancient stargazers. A faint blue streak above, fires flickering below, the world trembling with significance. Maybe you'd invent a story. Atlas is a wandering soul, a spirit exiled from its star searching for a home. Maybe you'd warn your neighbours to store grain or expect war. Maybe you'd write poetry about its light falling into the sea. Funny how the instinct to turn science into story never really leaves us. As you drift on, the night around you thickens with silence. Atlas is still out there, drawing its fragile arc, same as it would have done for Sumerians, Egyptians, Vikings. The difference is you know its chemistry, its orbit, its alien birth. But even with all that knowledge, a whisper of superstition lingers. Some part of you still feels it. Atlas is not just data, it is omen, visitor, reminder, and mirror all at once. The more you picture Atlas, the more your thoughts latch onto its motion. Its spin, its tumble, its refusal to behave like a neat classroom diagram. Comets usually rotate, sure, but Atlas's rotation is peculiar, wobbling in a way that doesn't match a simple spin on a single axis. Imagine tossing a half-melted snowball into space and watching it pirouette drunkenly, never quite repeating the same posture twice. That's what astronomers are seeing through their instruments, a slow, inconsistent dance, like the comet can't decide which way is up. When scientists measure light curves, those gentle rises and falls in brightness caused by an object turning, they usually map out a regular rhythm. But Atlas delivers a clumsy jazz beat instead. Its flickers don't line up neatly, making it hard to pin down a rotation period. Some teams claim it spins every few hours, others every few days, and some suggest it might even be in a state called non-principal axis rotation. That's the fancy way of saying Atlas is wobbling like a poorly balanced washing machine. Historians still argue whether ancient sky watchers ever noticed these subtle changes. Most comets appeared to their eyes as steady smears, but there are scattered records of stars blinking or trembling in the sky. Could those have been glimpses of irregularly rotating comets? The debate continues, mostly because scribes didn't leave us light curves, just metaphors. You grin at the quirky human impulse to compare cosmic chaos with household mishaps. In the 19th century, one astronomer actually wrote that a comet's spin resembles a candle guttering in the wind, and that's still not a bad analogy. Picture Atlas, uneven jets of gas erupting from its crust, each one like a tiny thruster. With no central control system, the poor comet just jitters and shimmies, knocked off balance by its own exhalations. It's like a cat chasing its tail, except the tail is a plume of vapor millions of kilometers long. And here's the part that makes you chuckle. This clumsy wobble might be saving Atlas from destruction. A steady spin would let sunlight roast the same patch of ice over and over, cracking it apart faster. But by tumbling unpredictably, Atlas distributes the stress, almost like it's improvising a survival strategy. No one's saying Atlas is thinking, but the effect is the same. It lasts longer because it refuses to move neatly. Messy motion as resilience. Not a bad lesson for humans either. Of course, there's always someone willing to nudge the debate toward the fringe. A few voices online murmur that Atlas's erratic spin looks too strange, as if deliberate course correction were happening. They point to spacecraft that also tumble to maintain balance or vent heat. Mainstream scientists roll their eyes, insisting it's just gas jets and uneven mass distribution. But you can't help enjoying the mental image. A battered, icy craft from another star stumbling through our system like a drunk tourist who doesn't remember how they got here. When you think about it historically, rotation was one of the first signs that comets were real bodies, not illusions. In the 1600s, Johannes Hevelius carefully sketched changes in comets' appearances night after night. noting that they must be spinning and venting. Hevelius, by the way, also brewed beer on the side, because who wouldn't want a pint after charting cosmic snowballs? You imagine him holding a mug in one hand and a quill in the other, glancing up at Atlas's blue shimmer, muttering, "Well, that one's spinning funny." The truth is, Atlas's awkward tumble makes it more human somehow. Planets glide with regal steadiness. Moons turn like clockwork. But Atlas fumbles, jerks, adjusts, keeps moving anyway. Watching it is like watching yourself trip on a sidewalk but recover before anyone notices. You can't help but root for it. And as your eyes close halfway, you feel the wobble in your own breath. In, out. Not perfectly even, but enough to keep going. You and Atlas share that rhythm. Imperfect, unpredictable, yet steady in its persistence. Somewhere out there it keeps tumbling under the sun's light, and here you are, tumbling slowly towards sleep. You listen harder now, as if the night itself might be carrying faint static from far away. Because Atlas isn't just a picture in the eyepiece anymore. It's also a ripple in radio waves, a whisper caught by instruments tuned to frequencies beyond human hearing. Giant radio dishes swivel toward it, those vast white bowls leaning against the sky like attentive ears. And what they found, or at least hinted at, is not silence, not entirely. Normally comets emit a kind of background chatter, bursts of radio emission as molecules tumble, vibrate and snap apart under sunlight. It's chemical noise, nothing to panic about, as ordinary in space as crickets are on Earth. But with Atlas, observers logged something peculiar. Faint flickers that looked like short pulses rather than the usual broad hiss. Some teams called it interference, a glitch from terrestrial equipment. Others raised eyebrows and murmured that the pattern seemed too consistent. Historians still argue whether similar strange signals reported during the 1960s, comet studals, were genuine detections, or just the byproducts of early cranky instruments. The debate never really died. It just resurfaced with Atlas. You picture yourself in a control room, headphones on, eyes half shut as you listen to a soft rush of white noise. Then out of nowhere, a faint ping 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 threads through. Could be static, could be coincidence, but your heart still skips, because what if it isn't? Here's a quirky tidbit. In 1967, when Jocelyn Bell Burnell first recorded pulsars, she jokingly labelled the mysterious regular signals LGM1 for Little Green Men. She never believed it, of course, but the nickname stuck long enough to remind everyone how tempting it is to assign intelligence to any unusual pulse. Atlas is walking that same tightrope now. Do you dismiss the oddities as natural or let your imagination peek over the fence into stranger pastures? The newspapers won't go near it. The official line is radio artifacts, natural outgassing, instrumental errors. And sure, maybe that's all it is. Radio telescopes are finicky beasts, plagued by stray cell tower chatter, by satellites sneaking across the band, even by microwaves from the staff kitchen. True story, one observatory spent years chasing a mysterious daily signal, only to discover it was the microwave oven being opened early before the timer finished. So yes, Atlas's flickers might be just cosmic static, or just cosmic comedy, but in the dim stillness of your room you allow yourself to wonder. What if? Not, what if it's aliens, necessarily, but what if the comet itself is more than frozen dust? What if those pulses are signatures of chemistry so complex we mistake it for signal? What if some molecules from another star arrange themselves in ways that mimic intention? You shift on your pillow, amused by your own racing thoughts, because even if the static is meaningless, the very act of listening connects you to it. Somewhere, right now, scientists are pointing their instruments at Atlas, scanning patiently, ears wide open to the dark. Their screens may flicker with squiggles that look like nonsense. But you know, behind their calm faces, that same question hums, what if this is something new? And then your imagination slips back into history, the Cold War era when every blip on a radar screen made people nervous. If Atlas had wandered by then, would its radio whispers have been mistaken for enemy satellites? Would governments have scrambled jets just to reassure themselves that the noise was only chemistry, not a coded transmission? You smile at the absurdity. Humanity has a way of making everything about itself, even comets that couldn't care less. Atlas doesn't broadcast on purpose, it exhales, it crackles, It interacts with sunlight and your antennas happen to pick it up. The universe is under no obligation to stay quiet just because your species insists on sleeping at night. Still, as you let the thought wash over you, you give Atlas its own voice. A faint whispering hum, not words, not meaning, just presence. Like listening to the wind through pine needles or a faraway train you can't see. It doesn't need to say anything more. The fact that it can be heard at all is miracle enough. And you drift a little deeper into the static, comforted by the idea that somewhere in the background of the cosmos, a visitor is leaving fingerprints of sound. Atlas doesn't need to be speaking for you to feel spoken to. The funny thing is, you'd expect Atlas to dominate headlines. Third interstellar visitor detected should sound like the sci-fi blockbuster of the decade. But what you mostly see are shrug-worthy articles buried between celebrity divorces and sports scores. The coverage is muted, sanitized, almost bored. You scroll through your newsfeed, waiting for awe, and get a yawn instead. It's as if the universe handed humanity a front-row ticket to a once-in-an-epoch show, and the press decided to treat it like a rerun. Part of it is narrative fatigue. After ʻOumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019, maybe editors think the novelty's worn off. Interstellar objects, old news, except 3 confirmed in all of history isn't old news. That's rare, like spotting a unicorn and then spotting another one 5 years later. Historians still argue whether medieval records of strange hairy stars could count as unrecognized visitors, but the modern tally remains microscopic. Yet the media spins Atlas as just another quirky comet, as though billions of years of travel weren't worth a second headline. You imagine the newsroom conversation. Reporter: "Hey, there's a comet from another star system." Editor: "Cool. Can you make it sound less scary?" Reporter: "Sure. I'll just call it a faint smudge in the sky." And just like that, the wonder gets filed under miscellaneous. There's a quirky tidbit about this trend. In 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, newspapers went the opposite direction. They hyped it so hard that people bought gas masks, comet-proof tonics, even anti-comet soap. Today, faced with something arguably stranger, editors do the reverse. They downplay. Maybe that's progress. Maybe it's cowardice. Maybe it's just the economics of clicks. Panic sells only if it feels immediate. Atlas won't crash into Earth, so no clicks. You suspect there's also a whisper of control behind the blandness. News outlets don't want to stoke the alien probe crowd, the ones who'll flood comment sections with theories. Safer to keep things beige, so they strip Atlas of its weirdness, the wobbling spin, the strange chemistry, the radio flickers, and leave only the word comet. Familiar, harmless, ignorable, like telling you there's a new pigeon in town. And yet, people crave the mystery. Scroll past the headlines and you'll find forums buzzing with questions, amateur astronomers posting grainy photos, and late-night threads wondering what else the news won't say. You can almost hear the sigh of the universe. It drops an interstellar relic into your sky, and the loudest conversation happens in hobbyist chat groups. You stretch out under your blanket, amused and a little exasperated. Because deep down, you know the silence isn't really silence. Governments, universities, observatories, they're watching Atlas with hungry eyes. They just won't say it too loudly. It's like when someone at a party whispers gossip in the kitchen, but pretends everything's normal in the living room. The cosmic equivalent of nothing to see here. Still, there's something oddly comforting about being in on the secret. The news may bury the story, but you're awake at 2 a.m, listening, watching, imagining. You know the headlines aren't the whole picture. You know Atlas isn't just a comet. And in the quiet gap between what's reported and what's real, you find a space to dream. After all, not every wonder needs a front-page banner. Sometimes the best stories are the ones you whisper to yourself in the dark, that a piece of another star system is passing by tonight, faint and fragile, but undeniably here, and you, lucky enough, are paying attention. You picture the observatories at night, domes cracking open like sleepy eyelids, motors humming as telescopes track the faint glimmer of Atlas. Officially, the reports stay bland, magnitudes, orbital arcs, chemical ratios, but behind those public numbers, there's a different atmosphere. You can almost hear the low murmur of scientists at midnight, coffee cups abandoned on cluttered desks, eyes fixed on flickering graphs. They're not bored, they're not dismissive. They're whispering quietly, carefully, as if the comet might overhear. It's always like this. The real conversations happen at the edges of conferences, in late-night emails, in private Slack channels where careers aren't at risk. Out in the open, the line is cautious. Atlas shows some unusual properties, but all within expected natural variation. Behind closed doors, the tone shifts. That tail looks too blue. The spin data makes no sense. Did you see those radio blips? It's not fear so much as awe, tinged with the nervousness of scientists who know the press is watching their every word. Historians still argue whether Galileo's students whispered in similar tones when he turned his telescope on comets in the early 1600s. Some records suggest they weren't sure what to make of the fuzzy intruders. Were they solid? Were they atmospheric? The debates were hushed, because challenging orthodoxy too loudly could get you more than bad peer reviews. Atlas is safer ground, but the tradition of whispered science lives on. Here's a quirky tidbit you can't shake. In the 1980s, during Halley's comet fever, a group of astronomers jokingly formed the Order of the Blue Comet, a tongue-in-cheek secret society for comet obsessives. They met in hotel bars during conferences, swapping rumours and half-baked theories. You wonder if right now there's a similar midnight cabal around Atlas. Not a secret order maybe, but a scattered fellowship of insomniacs trading notes under the radar. And you can't help but imagine the room. A chalkboard scrawled with orbits, a projector flicking between blurry images, someone muttering about non-principal axis rotation, while another insists the spectral data doesn't match any catalogued comet. Someone makes a joke about alien refrigerators leaking Freon, and the group laughs a little too loudly to cover their unease. It's not paranoia, it's reverence. The sense that something bigger than tidy categories is drifting just close enough to glimpse. Meanwhile, the official line to the public remains steady, almost stubbornly dull. You feel the dissonance the same way you'd feel at a party when everyone keeps insisting the music isn't too loud, even as your ears ring. The gap between what's said and what's thought stretches wide, and in that gap you find the truth. Curiosity thrives best in whispers. The observatories keep turning, the data keeps stacking, and you imagine the scientists slipping back into their homes at dawn, carrying the comet in their thoughts like a secret they can't quite share. You think about their partners asking, "How was your night?" and them answering, "Fine," even though their minds are still tangled in blue tails, radio flickers, and improbable spins. And you realise you're in the same position. You could tell your friends tomorrow, "I spent last night thinking about an interstellar comet," and they'd probably nod politely, then change the subject. But here, in this quiet stretch of narration, you're allowed to lean into the wonder, to admit that something about Atlas makes you feel small and lucky all at once. The whispers aren't proof of conspiracy. They're proof of awe, proof that even in an age of space probes and particle accelerators, a faint smudge in the sky can still keep grown adults awake at night, whispering like children at a sleepover, half afraid of the dark, half thrilled by it. So you close your eyes, hearing those midnight voices as if they're drifting into your own room. Murmurs of wonder, fragments of equations, the soft clink of coffee mugs. Atlas isn't just out there in space, it's here, reshaping the cadence of human conversation, one whisper at a time. You let your mind drift past the whispers, deeper into the substance of Atlas itself. Because beneath the glow and wobble and static lies something almost unthinkable. This object is older than your planet. Dust collected from its spectrum suggests it formed in a cold nursery long before Earth was even a molten embryo. You imagine its ingredients, tiny grains of silicate, flecks of carbon, shards of ice, pressing together in the outskirts of a star system that may not even exist anymore. And then, eons later, a gravitational shove sent it drifting into interstellar night, wandering until it finally stumbled across your sun. That idea alone is dizzying. When dinosaurs stomped across Cretaceous swamps, Atlas was already on its journey. When the first trilobites scuttled through shallow seas, Atlas was still drifting. When stars were still rearranging themselves into the spiral you now call the Milky Way, Atlas might have been cooling in its cradle. Historians still argue whether comets seeded early Earth with water and organic molecules, but there's no argument about this. Atlas carries chemistry far older than any mountain or ocean you've ever seen. You picture its surface as a scrapbook of eras. Some grains might predate our sun, forged in the death throes of other stars. Others might have been altered by radiation in the interstellar void, their bonds subtly rearranged over millions of years. Each speck is a memory, a fragment of a time before time meant anything to humans. And here you are, lying comfortably in bed, imagining holding a sample in your palm. The weight would be nothing, but the history would crush you. Here's a quirky tidbit. In the 1990s, scientists recovered microscopic dust from comets that landed on Earth's upper atmosphere. Some grains contained structures called GEMS, glass with embedded metal and sulfides. These were thought to have formed in the very first dust clouds of the galaxy, billions of years old. You chuckle softly. Even in acronyms, scientists can't resist poetic coincidence. Gems, indeed. Atlas, if captured, could be full of such jewels, each a relic from the dawn of worlds. And yet age doesn't mean fragility alone. For Atlas to survive this long, it must have endured interstellar gauntlets, collisions with stray particles, radiation storms, the tug-of-war of passing stars. It's been scuffed, weathered, altered, but not erased. There's resilience in that. The same way a stone polished by a river tells you of every current it's resisted, Atlas's dust tells you of the void it's traversed. You wonder if its home system is still out there. Maybe it's circled a red dwarf star that's still quietly burning. Or maybe its parent star went supernova, scattering its children into exile. If the latter, then Atlas isn't just old, it's an orphan, a survivor from a family that no longer exists. That thought tugs at you. A body older than Earth, carrying not just chemistry but absence, the memory of a vanished sun. Of course, the news doesn't frame it that way. Dust samples suggest ancient origin sounds sterile, almost boring. It doesn't say, "You're watching matter older than your world swing past your sky." But you know better. You've seen enough to read between the lines. You think back to myths again. In many traditions, comets were seen as ancestors, spirits of the dead sweeping through the heavens. How strange that their intuition wasn't so far off. Atlas really does carry the dust of the long dead, stars that burned before your own sun lit up. A funeral procession of atoms still glowing faintly as they drift by. And as you settle deeper into your pillow, you feel that resonance. You too are made of ancient atoms forged in stellar hearts, scattered and recombined. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your breath, all star stuff. Atlas isn't just older than you. In a way, it's related to you, distant kin across time. You're both children of forgotten suns, just shaped into different forms. So when you glance upward, know this: you're not just looking at a comet, you're looking at your own ancestry written in dust. And that realization makes Atlas's brief visit feel less like a curiosity and more like a reunion, fleeting, fragile, and impossibly precious. You can't help but imagine the tension humming under Atlas's fragile skin. A comet this old is rarely a neat solid block. It's more like a loose snowbank, layered with cracks, cavities and weak seams. Each time sunlight warms its surface, gases trapped inside expand and shove, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, and if Atlas happens to be riddled with fractures, well, the result isn't a graceful departure from our solar system, but fragmentation. A slow unspooling, one piece breaking off after another, like a loaf of stale bread crumbling under pressure. The thought unsettles you, because when comets fragment, their trails don't just vanish, they spread. Shards of rock and ice scatter into new orbits, some smaller than houses, some larger than cities. Normally, those fragments pass harmlessly, but sometimes their paths brush near Earth. You remember the Tunguska event of 1908, when a cometary or asteroidal fragment exploded in the Siberian sky, flattening forests across 2,000 square kilometers. Historians still argue whether it was a comet fragment or an asteroid chunk, but the effect was the same: devastation, all from something no larger than a modest football field. And Atlas is bigger. Its fragments would be smaller than its nucleus, sure, but still dangerous enough to make meteor showers look tame. Scientists have already run the orbital models, smoothing error bars into tidy graphs. Publicly, they say there's no threat. Quietly, you suspect they cross their fingers under the table, because chaos theory has a way of laughing at confidence. You smirk at the quirky tidbit that in the 19th century, some people genuinely believed comets carried diseases in their tails. Doctors sold tonics to ward off comet fevers, certain that invisible pathogens rained from the sky. Ridiculous maybe, but you can't deny there's a kernel of truth. A fragment crashing into Earth would deliver something worse than fever, not germs but energy, enough to flatten cities or boil oceans depending on the size. In a way, they weren't wrong to be uneasy, but as you lie here you sense the duality. On the one hand, Atlas fragmenting would mean trouble, meteor showers, maybe even impacts. On the other hand, fragmentation is how comets feed your night skies with beauty. The Perseids, the Geminids, the Leonids, all meteor showers are the long-dead debris of crumbling comets, sparks left behind for Earth to sweep through. So if Atlas does break apart, some future generation might stand under glowing streaks and make wishes on dust older than Earth itself, a quiet kind of gift wrapped in danger. The scientists monitoring Atlas talk about it in terms of probabilities and stress thresholds. They model the sublimation pressures, compare them with its spin wobble, and calculate how likely it is to crack. But you prefer the more poetic frame. Atlas has travelled billions of years only to risk breaking apart in front of your eyes. Like an ancient traveller finally staggering at the doorstep. It's tragic and beautiful at once. You picture yourself on a clear night, watching. Maybe one evening Atlas looks faint but whole. Then, a few nights later, telescopes report multiple fragments where once there was one. The comet disintegrates, scattering like confetti across the solar system, leaving a ghost of itself in its place. The news would call it a catastrophic breakup. You'd call it a final performance, and maybe, in some cosmic irony, those fragments would outlast the parent. Pieces of Atlas drifting in wide arcs, some intersecting Earth's path centuries from now, others sailing off as new messengers. Atlas wouldn't be gone, it would simply be multiplied, its story rewritten in smaller, brighter sparks. For now, though, you breathe with relief. The odds say Atlas will hold together, at least during its brief swing through our skies. You won't wake to headlines of fireballs, you'll just lie here, imagining the fragility, marvelling at how something so ancient can be undone by a little warmth, a little spin, a little breath of sunlight. You roll the thought around in your head like a coin. Is Atlas just a rock, or something else? The mathematicians would insist it's just physics, a body on a hyperbolic orbit, equations sprawled across whiteboards proving its natural course. But the more you follow its trail, the harder it is to ignore the tension between numbers and intuition. Mathematics versus instinct, calculation versus wonder. Astronomers chart its motion with precise vectors. Every flicker of its light gets translated into rotational models, its gases measured by spectroscopy, its speed defined down to decimal places. They'll tell you, nothing unusual here, just an icy body doing what icy bodies do. And yet those same data sets reveal anomalies. The non-uniform spin, the chemical ratios that don't match typical comets, the faint radio pulses that seem too regular to ignore. The math says comet, but your gut says something more. Historians still argue whether Newton himself ever suspected comets were messengers from beyond, not just wanderers tied to the sun. His writings hint at curiosity, even unease. He mapped their orbits with rigour, but he also described them in almost theological terms, like divine intrusions. That blend of precision and awe hasn't gone away. It just wears lab coats now. The quirky tidbit that sticks here. In 2018, a serious scientific paper suggested ʻOumuamua, our first interstellar guest, could be a light sail, a fragment of alien technology propelled by starlight. The suggestion wasn't fantasy. It was published in a peer-reviewed journal by a Harvard astrophysicist. The backlash was swift, but the idea lingers, like a half-forbidden song. And if people whispered that about ʻOumuamua, how long until Atlas earns the same speculation? You smirk, imagining two astronomers at a cafe table. One, it's obviously just a comet. The other, so was ʻOumuamua until it wasn't. Their coffee cools while their debate warms. Mathematics insists on probabilities. The chance of Atlas being anything other than natural debris is infinitesimal. But intuition insists on stories. Your mind wants to weave Atlas into a narrative, an envoy, a relic, a clue left in the dark. Humans don't dream in equations, they dream in metaphors. And this comet, wobbling through space with its strange blue shimmer, feeds both sides. You stretch under your blanket and feel the tug-of-war inside you. On one side, the comfort of science, the reassurance that everything has a formula. On the other, the thrill of uncertainty, the permission to wonder whether some things can't be boxed so neatly. Maybe Atlas is both, a comet by calculation, a mystery by imagination. And really, isn't that the best of both worlds? Numbers sharpen your vision, but wonder keeps your eyes open in the first place. If you relied only on math, you might never look up at all. If you relied only on intuition, you might call every comet an omen. Balance is the trick. So you let Atlas remain in that liminal space, half rock, half riddle. You don't need to solve it tonight, you just need to feel it. The way a body older than Earth can glide through your sky and remind you that truth is never just one thing. It's math and mystery, calculation and intuition, comet and maybe something more. Your thoughts wander now not through observatories or equations, but through the oldest part of human memory, the myths we stitched into the sky. Because if Atlas is strange to you, with all your apps and telescopes, imagine what it would have been to people who lived by firelight and story. A streak across the heavens wasn't just ice and dust, it was a messenger, a warning, a cosmic punctuation mark. The Greeks saw comets as fiery hair streaming from the gods. Aristotle called them sublunar phenomena, misty exhalations from Earth itself. Later, others tied them to fate, believing the heavens mirrored human affairs. If Atlas had appeared in Athens, you can imagine philosophers pacing marble courtyards, debating whether its pale blue glow meant war or wisdom. Historians still argue whether Aristotle genuinely dismissed comets as weather events, or whether later scribes simplified his words, but either way, the myths grew taller than the facts. In China, comets were catalogued with obsessive care. Every change in tail length, every unusual colour, was linked to political fortunes. A broom star sweeping the heavens might mean a dynasty's downfall. You picture an emperor waking to a report about a blue-tinged broom, his advisors nervously weighing whether to celebrate or panic. Atlas, with its delicate tint, would have sparked long nights of whispered interpretations. And then there's Norse lore, tales of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods marked by fiery signs streaking across the sky. Imagine a Viking warrior staring at Atlas, mistaking its shimmer for a blade of ice carried by some celestial giant. Perhaps he'd clutch his sword tighter, convinced the world was cracking open. Quirky tidbit. In 1910, some preachers declared Halley's Comet a literal herald of the apocalypse. They preached that its cyanogen tail was God's judgment, invisible poison sweeping the earth. Meanwhile, opportunists sold comet insurance. You chuckle softly at that. People willing to pay premiums against divine sky gas. If Atlas had shown up then, blue and alien, the same insurance men would have made a killing. But for every omen of doom, there were also myths of renewal. Some cultures believed comets carried fertility, sprinkling life from the heavens. The Maya sometimes associated them with maize, seeing in their glowing tails the same promise as a stork's golden tassels. If Atlas drifted into their skies, they might have sung to it, praying its dust would seed their fields. You realise myths don't just distort the truth, they preserve the wonder. Even now, when you know Atlas is frozen gas and cosmic dust, your instinct is still to personify it, to ask what message it carries. The scientists strip it down to numbers, but your mind dresses it back up in metaphor. That's how humans cope with the incomprehensible. We turn it into story. And so you drift between worlds, equations on one side, folklore on the other. Neither feels complete on its own. Together, though, they make Atlas more alive, a body of ice older than Earth, painted with tales of gods and endings, trailing chemistry that could spark life. A comet, a myth, a message, all at once. As your breathing slows, you let the folklore wrap around you like a blanket. You don't need to decide if Atlas means doom or blessing. You only need to feel what every culture has felt, the strange pull of a sudden light in the heavens, making you pause, making you wonder. The deeper you sink into Atlas's story, the more you start to notice the silence around it. Not just in headlines, but in official tones, in clipped sentences, and the way certain details seem to slide off the page. It feels less like indifference and more like choice, as though someone decided that too much wonder or too much strangeness would be inconvenient. You can almost hear the meeting, a row of officials, arms folded, agreeing that the public doesn't need another dose of cosmic uncertainty right now. Governments have long had this reflex. In the 20th century, UFO reports often disappeared into files marked classified, not because they proved anything extraterrestrial, but because the ambiguity itself made authorities uncomfortable. With comets, the stakes are different, but the instinct remains. Atlas has odd chemistry, erratic spins, flickers in radio data, but instead of fanning those flames, agencies downplay them. Safer to treat it as an ordinary comet than risk spiralling public imagination. Historians still argue whether the Catholic Church really suppressed news of Halley's Comet in 1456 to prevent panic during wartime, or whether the silence was just coincidence. The record is murky, but the idea feels familiar. When fear threatens stability, silence is easier than truth. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 1986, when Halley's Comet returned, the Soviet Union limited coverage of its dim appearance, fearing it would disappoint the public and look like a propaganda failure. Imagine that, editing a comet's brightness to save face. If that doesn't show the entanglement of politics and skywatching, nothing does. And so you wonder, what if Atlas is stranger than the reports suggest? What if the whispers among astronomers about its wobble, its signal, its fragile chemistry are sharper than the public versions? Not because anyone's hiding doom, but because awe is messy. Awe stirs conspiracy, ignites speculation, and fuels late-night ramblings like yours. Maybe the quiet tone is just an attempt at control, but here in the stillness, you admit you're glad for the mess. You want the details raw and unpolished, not filtered through press releases. You want the possibility that Atlas is more than just another comet, even if the truth is mundane. Governments hush, but you lean into the noise because silence has never stopped wonder. It only shifts it into quieter corners. You imagine amateur astronomers across the world, backyard scopes pointed up, online forums buzzing. They aren't waiting for permission to be curious. They're tracing Atlas in real time, swapping grainy photos, cross-checking ephemerades. Curiosity finds its way through gaps in official silence. The sky is too big to censor, so while the hush lingers, you feel a kind of secret joy. Atlas doesn't belong to governments or universities. It belongs to anyone who tilts their head back and notices the faint smudge drifting overhead. No press release can erase that. You close your eyes, smiling at the irony. The hush that tries to keep Atlas ordinary only makes it more extraordinary in your imagination. Because sometimes the absence of noise is the loudest clue that something remarkable has passed through. You lie still, staring at the ceiling as if it were the night sky. And Atlas's journey presses on in your thoughts. For all the debates, the rumours, the whispers of suppression, there's one truth you can't escape. Atlas doesn't care. It drifts on, indifferent to your sleepless awe, to your governments, to your telescopes. And in that indifference, there's a strange kind of comfort. Because the comet reminds you how small you are. Not in a cruel way, more like a nudge, a soft reminder that your dramas, your deadlines, your worries are tiny ripples against an ocean that stretches billions of years. Atlas has been travelling since before Earth had forests, long before your ancestors stood upright. It will still be travelling when the last trace of your city crumbles into dust. And somehow, instead of making you despair, that thought loosens the tightness in your chest. Historians still argue whether Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor-philosopher, ever witnessed a comet during his reign. But his writings echo the same perspective. The stars remind you of your place, and in that humility lies peace. Atlas is just another star wanderer passing by, and you, brief fragile, are lucky to notice at all. You smirk at the quirky tidbit that Charles Darwin once wrote in his diary about feeling overwhelmed by the majesty of the stars during his voyage on the Beagle. He admitted it left him oddly calm, as though the very vastness soothed his restless mind. You imagine him lying on deck, seasick, staring at the heavens, maybe catching a comet streak and thinking the same thing you're thinking now. I am small, but I am part of this. Atlas sharpens that feeling. Here's an interstellar visitor, utterly alien, born in a nursery you'll never see, shaped by a star you'll never know. Yet it shares your sky for a moment. That overlap, your brief life brushing against its eternal journey, feels almost intimate. You'll vanish long before Atlas crosses the next star, but for tonight, you're companions. And isn't that strange comfort? That you don't need to be central to the story, that you don't need the comet to mean anything. Its very indifference frees you. Because if the cosmos is that vast, then your mistakes shrink with it. Your regrets are no more lasting than footprints in sand. Atlas carries on, and so will you, until one day you don't. And that's fine. You think of it like background music. The universe hums along, steady, immense, whether or not you're listening. You're not the conductor. You're just one of the listeners, catching the tune for a short while. Atlas, with its faint blue glow, is just one note in that cosmic melody. You catch it, savor it, and then let it drift away. You breathe deeper now, shoulders loosening. The comet doesn't need you to solve it, doesn't need you to hold it in headlines or equations. It exists, and that's enough. And you exist, briefly, alongside it. That's enough too. You picture yourself slipping quietly into the ranks of the searchers, the ones who don't wait for headlines or official releases, the ones who keep their own eyes on the sky. Because while governments hush and newsrooms yawn, ordinary people are still chasing Atlas with backyard telescopes, digital cameras, and sheer determination. It's almost comical. A visitor older than Earth, tracked not just by billion-dollar observatories, but also by someone in sweatpants adjusting a tripod on their lawn. Amateur astronomers have always played this role. In fact, many comets are named after them. Caroline Herschel discovered 8 comets in the 18th century, often from chilly rooftops with equipment that would look like toys today. Historians still argue whether she was fully credited in her time or overshadowed by her brother William, but her quiet persistence left a permanent mark on astronomy. You imagine her peering into the cold night, whispering to herself with the same thrill people feel now when they glimpse Atlas in a grainy CCD image. The quirky tidbit here: in 1995, a pair of amateur astronomers, Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp, discovered a comet almost simultaneously from 2 different backyards. Hale-Bopp became one of the most widely observed comets of the 20th century, bright enough to be seen with the naked eye for 18 months. The coincidence was so charming that newspapers actually called it the People's Comet. If Atlas were brighter, you suspect it would have earned the same nickname. Instead, Atlas belongs to the searchers who don't mind squinting. They swap coordinates on online forums, upload photos where the comet is barely a smudge, and cheer one another on. Yes, that faint blur is it. You caught it. It's a kind of quiet fellowship, bonded not by spectacle but by persistence. You smile, imagining someone half a world away, standing in their backyard under a completely different sky, yet watching the same visitor as you. There's something beautifully democratic about it. The sky doesn't care about budgets or politics. It offers Atlas to anyone willing to look up. A child with binoculars, a retiree with a telescope that rattles in the wind, a graduate student sneaking outside between assignments. All of them are part of Atlas's audience. The professionals may publish the papers, but the amateurs keep the wonder alive. You close your eyes and picture a map of the globe, dotted with glowing pinpricks, each one a person leaning back, adjusting focus, holding their breath. Some succeed, some don't, but all of them are linked by the act of trying. Atlas has no idea it's being followed by this scattered army of insomniacs. But maybe that's the beauty. The search itself is the gift. And maybe you're part of it too, not with a telescope, but with your imagination. By lying here, awake, curious, you join the chorus of searchers. You become one of the quiet witnesses to an interstellar wanderer. No certificate, no discovery credit, but participation nonetheless. Atlas keeps drifting, and so do the searchers, chasing it pixel by pixel, night by night. Together they weave a net of attention wide enough to hold a comet for a moment before it slips back into you forever. And you realise that net includes you. Your thoughts wander toward the wild ideas that always surface when a visitor like Atlas comes around. The dreams of reaching it, intercepting it, touching it before it slips away forever. It sounds impossible, like trying to chase a speeding train on a bicycle. Atlas is moving tens of kilometres every second, a one-way traveller with no return ticket. And yet the proposals exist, plans sketched in late-night labs, half practical, half science fiction, but always fueled by that irresistible question, what if we went? Some engineers imagine a fast probe launched on a powerful rocket slingshotting around planets to catch Atlas on its outbound leg. Others sketch ideas of laser sails, lightweight craft pushed by beams of energy from Earth, racing ahead at unprecedented speeds. A few even whisper about nuclear-powered interceptors, the kind of project that sounds less like exploration and more like a movie script. None of them are easy. In fact, the math usually says, too late, too costly, too fast, but the dreaming never stops. Historians still argue whether the 1970s Comet Rendezvous asteroid flyby mission was cancelled due to budget limits or lack of vision. Either way, if it had flown, humanity might have had the tech ready to meet interstellar guests today. Instead, Atlas passes by untouchable, like a celebrity behind bulletproof glass. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 2019, just after ʻOumuamua left, a group of enthusiasts proposed Project Lyra, a plan to launch a probe after it, even though it was already racing away. Their design relied on near-future propulsion that doesn't exist yet, but they published the papers anyway. It was less about catching ʻOumuamua and more about planting the seed. Next time maybe we'll be ready. Atlas is exactly the next time they dreamed of, though that's still too fast for our reach. You grin at the irony. Humanity has landed rovers on Mars, flown probes past Pluto, even crashed spacecraft into comets, but when something truly alien drifts by, we can only watch from the ground, like kids pressing faces to a candy shop window. You imagine the frustration of scientists, fingers twitching, knowing that precious dust and ice are slipping away, out of reach forever. But dreaming has its value. Interception proposals force engineers to think bigger. Faster propulsion, better navigation, more flexible missions. Every time a comet like Atlas appears, it nudges technology forward, even if we don't launch anything right away. Someday another visitor will come, and maybe then the rockets will be ready. You picture a future where spacecraft wait in orbit like lifeboats, ready to chase the next interstellar traveler. Imagine the headlines then. Probe intercepts alien comet. The photos would flood screens. Craggy cliffs of ice, alien dust fields glowing in sunlight, chemistry we've never seen before. For a moment, you let yourself slip into that fantasy, the thrill of touching something older than Earth with human hands. And then you exhale, letting the dream fade. Atlas will leave untouched, unsampled, unprobed. Its secrets will stay sealed in its nucleus, locked away as it sails back into the dark. But maybe that's part of its allure. Not every visitor needs to be caught. Some are meant to be watched, wondered at, and let go. Still, you can't help but whisper, maybe next time. You feel the ache already, the inevitability of Atlas leaving. Every night you've spent imagining it, tracing its strange spin, picturing its blue shimmer, listening for its whispers. It all leads to this moment. Because interstellar visitors don't stay. They never circle back, never pause long enough to feel familiar. Their paths are open-ended, hyperbolic. One close approach to the sun, then gone forever, slipping into the dark like a candle snuffed by distance. You imagine the observatories tracking it as its glow fades. Numbers on screens drop lower, magnitude 13, then 15, then 20, until it's indistinguishable from background noise. The great domes close their shutters, the data streams end, and Atlas becomes another file in the archives. Just like that, the cosmic guest has exited the stage. Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations recorded the same sense of melancholy. Babylonian star charts mark comets with abrupt entries. Appeared on this night, vanished on this night. No poetry, no mourning, just facts. But you suspect the people who stood outside staring upward must have felt what you feel now, the quiet sadness of something wondrous passing beyond sight. Here's the quirky tidbit. In 1986, after Halley's comet faded, people actually wrote letters to newspapers mourning its absence. One person in London described feeling bereft, as if a dear friend had gone travelling with no return address. You laugh softly at the melodrama, but the sentiment lands. Atlas too feels like a friend you'll never see again. You picture its future. Centuries from now, Atlas will glide past another star system, its glow faint but still intact. Maybe some distant civilization will see it and wonder about its chemistry, its origin, its odd blue tail. They won't know it once graced your skier. They'll make their own myths, write their own equations, whisper their own questions. In that sense, Atlas isn't leaving. It's continuing its role as messenger, just not for you. The melancholy sharpens when you realize how brief the overlap is. Billions of years of travel, and for a few months it happens to cross your path. You caught it, barely, like spotting a ship's lantern on the horizon for a single heartbeat, and then back into the abyss. But there's beauty in that brevity. The fleetingness makes you pay attention, makes you notice. If Atlas lingered forever, it would become ordinary, just another speck in the catalogues. Instead, it forces you into gratitude. You looked up, you wondered, you cared. That's enough. So you lie here, letting the image of Atlas shrink into darkness, its glow dissolving into memory. The sadness feels real but soft, like saying goodbye at a train station, knowing you'll never meet again, but grateful for the encounter. You whisper a farewell into the quiet room, even though no comet will ever hear it. And then you close your eyes, holding on to the comfort that the universe will send another. Not soon, not predictably, but someday. Another wanderer, another chance to marvel. Atlas is leaving, but the sky remains full of doors waiting to open. You lie back, the weight of all those thoughts settling into something gentler now. Atlas has come and gone, a fleeting guest in your sky, leaving behind fragments of wonder that glow brighter in your mind than in any telescope image. And as the quiet of your own night deepens, you realize the story of Atlas isn't just about the comet at all. It's about you, about what happens when a single streak of light brushes across your imagination. You step outside in your thoughts, barefoot on the cool grass, the air humming with distant crickets or maybe just the fan in your room. Above, the sky stretches wide, indifferent but intimate. Somewhere out there, Atlas has already slipped beyond naked eye reach, but its presence lingers, stitched into your awareness like a half-remembered dream. The echo of its path remains, not in the heavens, but in the way you now tilt your head upward more often, wondering what else drifts unseen. Historians still argue whether the human instinct to map stories onto the sky is hardwired or cultural. Some say it's survival, spotting patterns kept our ancestors alive. Others say it's poetry. Our brains can't resist weaving meaning where there might be none. Whatever the reason, you've done it too. You've taken Atlas, a rock and ice fragment older than Earth, and made it a character in your night. And here's a quirky tidbit to carry with you. The word comet comes from the Greek kometes, meaning long-haired star. Thousands of years later, with all our math and satellites, we still see that hair trailing across the heavens. Some names never lose their poetry. If Atlas could hear, maybe it would smile at the thought of being called long-haired after all this time. The room around you softens, the walls fade, the ceiling dissolves, and what's left is a boundless night where you're not the centre, but still belong. Atlas drifts away, but it leaves you with something oddly grounding. The sense that your life, short and flickering as it is, shares the same stage as interstellar travellers. You're not in control, you're not permanent, but you're here, looking up, noticing, and that noticing is enough. So you let the thought dissolve into calm. Atlas has moved on, and soon you will too, sliding into sleep, into dreams where the stars hum quietly and every faint streak across the sky feels like a secret written just for you. The echo of the comet becomes the echo of your own breath, steady, soft, fading into stillness. Good night, Atlas. Good night, listener. The sky is wide, the night is long, and your place within it is safe. Now, before you close your eyes completely, let's slow everything down. Let the pacing ease, like a river widening before it reaches the sea. The story of Atlas has carried you far, from icy chemistry and wobbling spins to myths of omens and whispers of governments. But now it's time to let the comet drift away and focus on nothing more than your own quiet. Breathe in slowly, filling your chest with a sense of spaciousness, and breathe out, letting it fall like dust back into the dark. The universe doesn't rush, and neither do you. Atlas will keep travelling for billions of years, but you don't need to follow. Tonight, you only need to rest. Picture the comet one last time, faint and delicate, its blue tail dissolving into starlight. It doesn't demand your attention anymore. It simply leaves behind a calm reminder that not everything is meant to be held. Some things arrive, glow for a moment, and vanish, and that's enough. The room around you is quiet now, the hum of the fan, the softness of blankets, the rhythm of your own breathing. They're the only sounds you need. Imagine yourself as a small part of the night sky, one point of light among billions, steady, safe, at peace. As your eyelids grow heavier, let your thoughts scatter gently, like comet dust spreading into the darkness. You don't need to solve anything, don't need to hold on to anything. The comet has gone, and with it, the last of your waking worries. Sleep is waiting, vast and calm. Drift there now, carried on the same silence that holds every star, every comet, every dream.